All right, let's talk about getting web hosting set up. Web hosting, of course, is the server and computer where your site will actually live, and there are a lot of options out there for it. Hosting is very important because finding the right host will have a large impact on the speed and options you have available. One of my favorite for smaller stuff is InMotion hosting. I worked with a company who had a site on there with their standard business hosting at about $7.99 a month, and it worked really well until they completely outgrew it. It is one of what is called shared hosting, and there are three types I'm going to talk about. Shared hosting means your site is a very small sliver on a server that hosts up to 100 to 200, maybe 300 if it's a giant server farm that's rated and connected to each other. But it takes a lot of different websites and shares the resources amongst them. It's generally pretty good and pretty cheap for most of your smaller websites. Now, if you have a massive website that is hosting videos or has a 20,000 orders in the database, or is verging up on 150 products, it can be a little tight for the fit. But for most options, $7.99 a month for a shared hosting is going to be pretty decent. The other option is called VPS. Known Host is who I go through for most VPSs, and it's a virtual private server. It is pretty much the same as a shared host, but instead of doing 300 websites to sharing the same resources, it is spawning off a virtual computer that is on a server rack like this. They have a very fancy animation too, which I always appreciate. But it can cost between $25 to $120 a month, and it gives you your own virtual server that you can manage and maintain and do a lot of stuff with. If you're hosting multiple sites, 3 or 4, that are all going to see a decent amount of traffic, this is where I would start going with hosting. And then, of course, there are dedicated servers where it is you are actually renting a server somewhere on a server farm, but this gets up in the hundreds of dollars a month. You don't really need this. So generally, shared hosting is what is going to be best and most economical. How do you judge what is a good shared host? That is really hard to do sometimes. But one of my litmus tests is, are they going to tell me enough tech information that I can cut the wheat from the chaff sort of thing? If they're going to tell me a lot of tech information, they're generally pretty confident in what they have. And I do not recommend GoDaddy for pretty much anything, but it can be okay. But if they give you a lot of information but not actual technical information, they're selling you on the concept rather than the details. Even if you don't get the details, they don't really want to share it out. This right here is a big red herring. Unmetered bandwidth really doesn't matter. There is no likelihood that unless you have suddenly gained 100,000 person audience, that your bandwidth is going to go over the general limits that they share. They don't even talk about bandwidth on here, I don't believe, because they don't really care. It's not a major issue. So InMotion is one that I like. DreamHost is another one that I like. They're both fairly good for this sort of stuff, and what you're looking for is the ability to have databases, what kind of disk space they're allowing, and in this case it's unlimited because they're not really too worried about it. And then if they provide any information about processor speed, amount of RAM they give, it's hard to tell because with shared hosting it varies bit by bit. Here's DreamHost. And here's their WordPress hosting. This is pretty decent. They don't provide as much information as the others. Here we go. It's shared. Their high volume has 30 gigabytes of space that is just for you. It has a little information here, but it doesn't have nearly as much as InMotion, which is why I like it. They tell you what they have there. So yeah, finding the right one that fits is often going to be a process of looking at reviews and seeing what other people have to say. You're always going to find a ton of horror stories, but, I have rarely gone wrong with InMotion or with DreamHost, but there are a ton of others out there. All right, let's talk about something important with hosting, making sure it is easy to maintain. Hosting is, of course, something you're going to have to do a little bit of, back-end work on, and so you're looking for something that has a control panel that makes it easy, because if you're not a server person, and it is hard to be a server person, then you want something like this. This is called cPanel. A lot of hosting sites use it. Plesk is another control panel, but something like this allows you to maintain and check everything. This is for an old game company I used to be a part of. But you can go in here and set up email accounts. It is easy enough to, create a new email and suddenly have an account for it. So you can, do this without actually having to, get into the nitty-gritty and write stuff in the, Linux side of things. You can set up new databases, which is going to be important for WordPress hosting. You can create, a database and a user fairly easily. It's, drag and drop. You can see your file manager or set up FTP accounts so you can connect into it. There are also access to things like stats that are built in here, or to check your bandwidth. And one of the very important things is you want to make sure you have access to compression or other stuff like that for site speed. Can you turn this on at this option? You also, when you're choosing a host, seeing if they have cPanel will probably save you a lot of time, even if it's an extra $1 to $5 a month. If this is an option for maintaining it and you feel like you're going to need to have hands-on with a couple of other things, this will save you that amount of time. But you can also go and check out their support documentation. A lot of times when I go search for something, to see who has done it and how they do it, InMotion support comes up. And it's pretty decent, telling me how to manage and maintain, sort of a cPanel thing that I haven't had a chance or reason to check out. So checking out their tech support documentation and seeing what the reviews are and how they respond in the comments is not a bad idea. So getting your host is going to be the second part of it. Once you get that all set up, you will have a name server that they will provide you. They will tell you what name server to go to. You can go over back to your domain registrar, pop that in, and then once DNS has updated, you will be ready to install a website or a CMS, and that'll be part 3.